each and every one of us, and thank you all so much for coming. Councillor Abigail Marshall Katung is my name, and I am the chair for this board, which is the Infrastructure Investment and Inclusive Growth Scrutiny Board. So lovely to see you all, and for those of you I haven't seen this year, a very, very happy New Year, hoping 2024 will be much better than the last. Okay, so just to let you know that this meeting is webcast today, and those who are not able to be here and watching from home or wherever you are, you can watch it live, or you could watch the archived version later on our meeting webpage. So I would like to do a quick introduction to all the board members this morning, and I will start with Councillor Hamilton.
Good morning, everyone. Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Morning, everybody. Councillor Nicole Sharp, Temple Newton Ward.
Good morning, Isaac Wilson, Councillor for Wheatwood Ward.
Morning, John Garvani, Councillor Horsforth Ward.
Good morning, Michael Miller, I represent Kippax and Methley Ward.
Good morning, Councillor Mohammed Shaddad, Moortown and Meanwood Ward.
Morning, Mike Foster, Councillor for Ardsley and Robin Hood.
Morning, Neil Buckley, Councillor for Alwoodley.
Morning, Billy Flynn, Councillor for Arden Wharfdale Ward.
Morning, my name is Becky Atherton. I'm the Scrutiny Advisor to this board.
Thank you very much, board members. Thank you as well to all our guests. You will have your time as well to introduce yourselves once we come around to the agenda items. So quickly, we would like to go through agendas item 1 to 5. Becky, could you kindly take us through that, please?
Good morning, members. Item 1, appeals. There are no appeals against refusals of inspection documents. Item 2, there are no items excluded from the public domain. Item 3, late items of business. There are no late items today. Item 4, can I ask members to disclose any interests in accordance with Leeds City Council's Code of Conduct? I'll take silence as none. And apologies have been received from Councillor Lay, and I believe Councillor Galton is en route to substitute. And then item 6 is the minutes, Chair.
Thank you very much, Becky. Okay, so straight on to agenda item number 7, one that's very close to our heart on this board, which is the Leeds Affordable Housing Growth Delivery Partnership Action Plan. So thank you very much, members, for bringing this forward as well. It's good to see our executive member, Jess. So we would be introducing you shortly. Really looking forward to hearing from yourselves today on this agenda item. So this delivery of affordable housing has been a long-standing priority for members of our board. So those of you who were members of this board previously, you will recall that the Leeds Affordable Housing Growth Partnership Action Plan was published in January of 2023, just about a year now. So at that time, the Scrutiny Board requested that an update of the progress against the action plan should come back to ourselves in a year's time, and that's what's happened now. So this report sets out progress over the last year, and it also provides an indication of the activity for the next year as well. So officers, please, could you kindly begin your presentation? But however, before you begin, I would also like to invite all the attendees for this agenda item to kindly introduce yourselves, and to all our guests who are here, thank you for coming to join us this morning. So over to you.
Morning, Councillor Jess Lennox. I'm the Exec Board Member for Housing.
Good morning. My name's Councillor Helen Hayden. I'm the Exec Board Member for Sustainable Development and Infrastructure.
Good morning, Angela Barnacle. I'm the Chief Officer for Asset Management and Regeneration.
Morning, members. Morning, Chair. Adam Brannan. I'm Head of Regeneration in Angela's team.
Morning, Chair. Martin Elliott, Head of Strategic Planning in the Planning Department.
Morning all, Tamsin Hart-Jones, Assistant Director at Homes England.
Hello, I'm Matthew Walker. I'm Chief Executive of Leeds Federated Housing Association.
Excellent. Thank you all very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And we have got some slides that we will be sharing as well. Krista Jolly, who's the author of this report, was intending to join us today. Unfortunately, she's not very well. So I'd just really like to put on my record my thanks to Krista, who has really led this programme over the last 24, 36 months in making sure that we could have some positivity in what is definitely a very constrained market. The Leeds Affordable Housing Growth Partnership Plan is the first plan we've had, which isn't a city council plan. It's a plan that's been endorsed by all our 42 partners across the city. The city council is a really important part of delivering affordable housing, but it's not the only body that has a responsibility. And what we were really keen to do is to make sure that everybody was pushing in the same direction, which is why I'm really grateful today to have Tamsin from Homes England, who are the government's national body who are tasked with delivering housing, alongside Matthew from Leeds Federated Housing, and also incoming chair of the West Yorkshire Affordable Housing Partnership.
Not me, but
Not you,
thank you.
yes, but I'd like to give him that job. I'll put that on record. To support any members' questions and really to get under the detail of the paper itself. The paper was adopted last January, so we are 12 months into the vision. And I'm really pleased to say that in that 12 months, we've really managed to change the trajectory on affordable housing. And over the next 4 or 5 slides, my colleagues between Adam and Martin and our colleagues here will give you an overview of what that positivity is, which fundamentally is set up against a backdrop, which is a national housing crisis. I've been at the City Council 7 years now, and in that 7 years, we've always had around about 26,000 households on our waiting list that want the City Council to be their landlord. Of that, about 25% are in priority need. So we've really tried to make sure that we've tried to shift the dial and doing everything that we can in facing onto that national crisis.
Thanks, Angela. Thank you, Chair. I've got about 10 minutes of slides here, which I thought would be helpful just to set the scene, pull together some of the key themes and headlines from the paper, and give you some up-to-date information as regards some of the latest stats around affordable housing delivery in the city. Let me just move on, please, Becky. So this first slide, I think, just tries to pull apart a little bit what we mean by the housing crisis in the country. Very often it's framed in the media around the number of homes that are being built. And clearly that is important. That is a key aspect and contributor to accessibility and affordability of housing. But really how this plays out for many people in our city is that affordability. And what this slide shows, and I'll just explain what this presents, is the range of tenures from left to right. So on the left-hand side, social rent, which is the most accessible and affordable tenure that a household can access, through a range of affordable and intermediate tenures, such as affordable rent, market sale, shared ownership, to market sale right at the right-hand side. And it shows the household income that is required to access one of those tenures. And you can see the two lines that run across the chart there. The single dotted black line is the lower quartile income in Leeds. So that is the income that households at the 25% lowest earning level have available. The solid black line is the median income. So the point at which 50% of households earn more, 50% of households earn less. And that's set against that household requirement for access to each tenure. And what you can see is that as you move from left to right, every household in the 25% level and every household at the median level could afford to access social rent. When you move to shared ownership at 25% shared ownership, just about every household below the median income could afford to access. But once you get beyond those first 2 tenures and you start moving through the affordability scale, if you want to see it that way, you can see that the green bars start to nudge above that median level. So what that's telling us is that effectively, 50% of households in the city are really going to be struggling to access even kind of some of the most affordable housing typologies in tenures in the city. And that's quite stark. So, you know, when we talk about affordable housing, it's not just about affordable housing as we officially define it in planning policy terms. It is about the affordability of all tenures, and it affects, you know, a very large number of households in this city. So, in terms of that formal definition of affordable housing, we have set that in planning policy terms, and we have done that analysis through our strategic housing market assessment. So you'll be familiar, I think, that the local plan sets a housing delivery target, which is that quantum aspect that I talked about earlier of just over 3,200 homes every year. And within that, we've identified that there's a housing need of 1,230 affordable homes to be delivered each year. And broadly speaking, around 2/3 of that delivery should be affordable or social rented property, and about 1/3 should be what we call intermediate affordable housing, which is shared ownership, discounted market sale. And then also within that, just to emphasise that there is obviously detailed analysis around the needs of ageing households and ageing residents. So there's a particular figure of 280 homes that are required to meet extra care needs within the current the initial plan period up to 2028. So how have we performed against that? So the chart on the left-hand side, the bar chart, shows our 10-year delivery rate. And you can see that whilst there is variability each year, and we explain some of the reasons for that in the report, but broadly speaking, if you took a line from 2012, 2013, up to where we are now at 22, 23, there is a very positive upward trajectory in terms of that overall quantum of delivery. And in fact, the affordable housing delivery in the last year that we have stats available for is 633, which is obviously the highest in the last 10 years. So we are in a growing and positive position in terms of that trajectory. The round chart on the right-hand side shows who's been delivering that housing effectively. And you can see that around half of that delivery has been through our registered provider partners, housing associations and third sector partners. And then the remainder, roughly equally between our own council housing delivery and Section 106 delivery, which is the housing which is transferred from developers to RPs as part of their planning approvals through Section 106 agreements. So a very positive upward position over that 10-year period. I think it's really helpful to look at that comparatively, not just look at it as a kind of absolute picture in Leeds, and two ways that we can do that, which I think are really helpful. On the left-hand side, all these figures are taking a 5-year analysis, because I think it is helpful to look at that kind of rolling 5-year period, which would allow us to kind of smooth out some of those annual variances. On the left-hand side, looking at the national picture, you can see the first circular diagram shows that in Leeds, around 40% of our affordable housing delivery has been affordable rent, and 31%, 30.9% has been social rent. When you look across to the next round diagram there, and that's the national picture over that 5-year period, excluding London, then the proportion of affordable housing that we deliver in Leeds is much more affordable. There is a higher proportion of social rent. The national 5-year affordable housing supply is around 13%. So a significantly higher proportion in Leeds of that most affordable tenure. And then when we look at the table on the right-hand side, this is bang up-to-date information derived from the government's New Homes Bonus figures, which enables us to make a comparison across all local authority areas in the country. And we've just drawn out the core city comparisons here, because I think it's right that we kind of compare peer cities with each other. You know, the housing markets, the property markets, demography. Comparing Leeds to a Birmingham or a Newcastle is very different if we were to compare it to a shire county like North Yorkshire or Kent, for example. And what this enables us to show is that in terms of that overall supply, that quantum, if you look at the first column, Leeds has delivered over 17,000 new homes over the last 5 years. But specifically, the middle column showing that around 2,900 of those have been affordable. And that's actually the highest number of affordable homes of any core city in that 5-year period. And then that enables us in that final column to demonstrate just what proportion of our overall delivery has been affordable. So you can see that 16.6% figure, which is, I think, second or third highest, but against a high number of delivery. So if you compare Newcastle, for example, which is around 22% affordable housing delivery, that's against a much lower number than Leeds. So I think a very positive comparative picture there in terms of how Leeds compares with other core cities. And then just looking ahead, again, we're showing some kind of variability here in terms of the future financial years. But we have forecast based on our intelligence working with partners in the city that on average, we're looking at the next 2 or 3 years of about 750 new affordable homes each year. So that's again a step up from the high point we are currently with that 630 homes. Next year, in fact, fingers crossed, with all things going well, we think we will breach the 1,000 units mark for the first time in probably decades, which I think is an incredible feat that we put down to the great work of partners and council as well. I think that council housing activity is illustrated in that. So you can see the light blue in the bar chart there is showing the quantum of the council housing growth programme coming through, which will show this next year coming, the 310, which is going to be a kind of significant part of that. And I think it's just worth saying as well that through all of that activity, it's not just the council housing itself that will meet housing need. Clearly, we have a very large number of people on the housing register. All of these affordable homes will have nominations agreements with them. So the council will be able to connect that affordable housing delivery to the need on its register directly. So just a final slide. There's always a but, I suppose. There's always going to be a need for more. We talked about that need of 1,230 new affordable homes each year. We know there are around 26,000 households on the waiting list. It is a significant challenge. When you feed into that, the fact that we are losing stock through the right to buy process. And again, last year was unfortunately a bit of a high point in terms of the number of units that went from our stock through that right. And we are seeing, unfortunately, an increase in temporary accommodation requirements. Again, we are much better off than most core cities in that regard, but that number is increasing. And as the report indicates, those viability challenges are not going away. When we're talking about meeting affordability, and we have really strong market pressures in terms of inflation, interest rates, and challenges in acquiring land. And you throw in the kind of the challenges of affordability, which it's difficult to compete with a market offer sometimes there. I think the work of ourselves and our partners is going to be increasingly acute and challenged around meeting that growth requirement. Thank you.
Chair, I wonder if my colleagues want to say anything else at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. A few words from me, Chair, if that's okay. I'm the Chief Executive of Leeds Federated Housing Association. I've been there about 25 years in total, and I've been to lots of meetings in this room, but I don't recognise quite a lot of people in here. I've only met Sharon and Stuart and Jess previously, so hello to the people who I've never met before. If there are things in your areas that you want to talk to us as a housing association about, please get in touch. I'd be really keen to meet you. Leeds Fed's been around a very long time, if you don't know. Actually, it's our 50th anniversary next year. So we'll be celebrating that in an appropriate way, I'm sure. In terms of development specifically, because that's what we're talking about, Leeds Fed does, relative to our size, quite a lot of development. Over the 10-year period that we're kind of in the middle of, we're building about 1,300 homes, and roughly half of those are going to be in the Leeds district. So we're a significant, we feel, contributor to the development plans that the city has. We would probably build more in the city if there was an opportunity to do that, but we build as much as we can along with the other partners. And actually, partnership is a key part of what we do in Leeds. We're part of the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership. We might talk more about that later. That's a great vehicle for sharing information and making sure we're making the most of our combined resources. And also a partnership with Leeds City Council, where specific schemes require a more partnership approach. And I'd like to give an example of one of those, if I may, Chair, to give the committee or the board an example of how partnership can work in practice. And it's Sugar Hill, which Stuart only knows too well about, and he and I have talked about this in the past. for those of you not familiar with the scheme, it's had some challenging points to get to the point where it is. But I was at the groundbreaking ceremony just before Christmas and got the opportunity to meet the residents who are secure tenants there. There's about 10 of them, I believe, and I met the majority of them. And it was great to see we've got a scheme there where those residents are going to be living in the houses that they're still in, whilst we knock part of the site down and build new houses for them that they're going to move into straight from the houses they've lived in for some time. And when I say lived in for some time, I met one lady who hasn't given me permission. I haven't asked her. I won't tell her her name because she didn't tell me it was okay to do that. But I said to her, how long have you lived here? And she said, well, my son was born here and he's just turned 50. She'd lived on that site for 50 years. And I went down the row of people of the 10 who are still there, and the vast majority of them have lived there for 30, 40, 50 years. That's a significant period of time. And the prospect for them of having to up sticks and move to different parts of the city and the upheaval that would have created them from doing something different to what we're doing would have been significant. So I'm quite proud that we've been able to, in partnership with Leeds City Council, and it has been a partnership with Leeds City Council, both in terms of the work we've done to help the people living there work out what's going to happen, and in terms of the funding cocktail that we've had to put in place to make the scheme viable, we're going to end up with a scheme that people are very happy to live at. And when I said to them, how do you feel about the new houses? They all said, I can't wait to get my new house. And I think that's quite a turnaround from where at different points that journey on that scheme has been. So it is about as many homes as we can build. We know we're not building as many as the strategic housing market assessment says we need, but when we do what we can and we do it right, it makes a difference to the lives of people who live in those houses. And that's the point I just wanted to make, really. It's not just about numbers, it's about the people who live there. So thank you.
Thank you. So as Angela said, Tamsin Hart-Jones, I am one of the assistant directors at Homes England. We are the National Housing and Regeneration Agency, so the government's housing and regeneration agency, and we have all sorts of different tools that we can deploy to help bring forward housing and regeneration in partnership with our places. And I must say, we are a national agency, but we are based locally, so our office is here in Leeds down at Wellington Place. And as I say, we work really closely with colleagues here at Leeds, colleagues at the Combined Authority and our registered provider partners as well, to try and bring forward as many homes as we possibly can. As an agency, we went through a bit of a change over the last year. So in May 2023, we had the launch of our new strategic plan, which I think our partners have been crying out for a long time. So for a while, we were very much focused on housing supply, but the strategic plan that we've got, which is a 5-year strategic plan, enables us to intervene in regeneration as well. So bringing back regeneration into our remit, which is great, and amending some of the tools that we have. So a really good example of that is the Affordable Homes Programme, and that is one of our tools, the number one way that we can help to support, deliver affordable homes in Leeds and across the country. We've got flexibilities now that it's not just about new supply, but that we can fund support the replacement homes in addition to new supply. So that's been really important, so we can enable things like estate regeneration. So there's a number of changes that have happened. And I think for me, the key thing that we have here is a real visibility and an openness about some of the challenges and the opportunities and the pipeline that colleagues at the council. I always use an example, and I know that other places look to Leeds to say, how are they delivering? How can we learn from those lessons? And one of the key things I think is really important is there's a real understanding of the opportunities there, the pipeline, some of those challenges, and then we can really have a look at how we might be able to unlock those things. Really good example is Points Cross, which we know Adam's figures just then, a significant chunk of that delivery is about the Points Cross scheme in the city centre in the South Bank. That has been a real partnership effort from the council, Homes England, Guinness, the registered provider, and the Combined Authority. So bringing all of our tools together to unlock housing growth. So yeah, just from me, key message is the partnership working here is really strong.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all very much for that. Thank you, Adam, for stepping in as well. And I must say the report that's come through is very, very comprehensive. And I really liked especially the comparative analysis in terms of the data and the core cities. So just to say thank you to yourself and your team for the report, of which I'm sure members will dissect this morning. So yeah, huge thank you. Matthew, yeah, thank you very much. You might not know the entire board. This is a very dynamic board. They say one of the only constant things in life is change. So yes, we do change, but we know you. And huge congratulations on being 50, half a century old. So well done. And we look forward to your celebrations. What will be most important, we'll be having more affordable homes, like you've just said, with the celebration money. So don't go partying. Let's make sure we've got more houses in the city. So thank you very much for that. And yes, Tamsin, thank you for the partnership of obviously both of you with what we're doing with the council. And we look forward to hearing more from you this morning. So the first question I would like to ask yourselves, obviously, just to also help the public who are watching today, we go on about affordable housing, social housing, and sub-market rent. Can you just clearly tell us what the differences are when we're talking about affordable housing and also social housing, as well as sub-market rent, please? Thank you.
Yeah, Chair, I'll try and do that in a concise way. So social housing is the most affordable tenure, the most affordable rent level that a household will pay, and it is a rent that is set with reference to local incomes. So it's based on how people are able to afford rent. Affordable rent is conversely set with reference to local market levels. So it's not necessarily doesn't necessarily have regard to the individual household income. It has regard to and reference to what the market is charging for housing in any particular location. That's the essential difference, and that's how it ends up being a more affordable and a slightly less affordable rental level.
Thank you very much. I know Councillor Galton is dying to come in, but you would like to introduce yourself first, please. Thank you.
How opportune. Thank you, Chair. And can I say, in that world of change you just outlined, you are an ever-fixed mark. I'm Stuart Golden. I'm the councillor for Rothwell. And I'm sorry for being late. I'm afraid it was all my fault. I can't even blame the transport system today, as I usually do. Yes, I'm really interested in that last point that the Chair wanted clarity for, because I think that's key to the issue that we're discussing here today, because there's a huge need for affordable housing in the city, and it's really good that there's an integrated partnership that's focused on delivering it. However, the formulae that they use and the system that there is to enable affordable housing to happen can perhaps not deliver the best value outcome or the best sociable outcome. So for instance, when I've been talking to officers in the past and we talk about how right to buy receipts and whatever are passed over to registered social landlords instead of the council using them themselves to build their own council houses, I'm told, well, we're doing that because if we do it this way, then we can unlock some money from Homes England, and that means that we can deliver 80 units instead of 60. But some of the provisos that there are in that arrangement are, for instance, that the properties have to be at affordable rent as opposed to social rent. So we sort of maximize the number of affordable units. So maximizing the number of places people can live, but we're not maximizing the affordability of those units. So I just wonder if sometimes you think, actually, we won't go for the maximum amount of units because for a lot of people, 80% of market rent is still unaffordable. And we need to have a certain quantum of houses which are at social rent, which is usually around 60% of market value, because we need to respond to the needs of those people. And then I did notice in the list, this is the second question, sorry, Chair, that Wakefield District Housing has decided to build some houses just down the road in Cross Green or Saxon Gardens, that area. And I just wondered if that was part of planned development by one of our West Yorkshire partners, or whether there's a little bit of a free market out there and different operators are looking for opportunities and turning up where they think they'll make the best return, if you see what I mean. Because we've got a Leeds housing market and there was a Wakefield housing market, and I would have thought that Wakefield District Housing would be focused on theirs as opposed to ours, but I'm not sure if there's any quid pro quo there. So those are the first two questions for a starter. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. Perhaps I will start and then bring perhaps Martin and Adam and colleagues in on a few points. You're absolutely right, Councillor Galton. There is a blending of funding that can and can't happen with certain funding streams. So, for instance, right to buy funding cannot normally be blended with Homes England grant funding. And there's a certain alchemy that doesn't work there, or certainly doesn't work currently in policy. And what we try to do is make sure that within the financing regime that's set nationally, we can maximise delivery. And I'm very happy to go into the detail of that and bring finance colleagues should anybody so wish. Perhaps Martin will want to pick up the definitions, certainly under planning, and then Adam in terms of commuted sums and what we do to make things as affordable as possible. And then I'll come back to your second point about Wakefield District Housing, if that's okay.
Thanks, Angela. So I think the thing to clarify, Councillor Galton, is that the plan policy seeks that kind of basket of affordable products. It does that deriving from independent evidence called the SHMA, the Strategic Housing Market Assessment, which looks at the overall affordable needs that there are within Leeds and compares those with income levels to seek then to deliver where most of that affordable need arises. Now, we do know that the greatest need has been for that social rented, so that if you recall back to the first slide that Adam showed and the far left of that, which is what do we need to actually provide a home to be affordable to those in the lowest 25% income quartile. Those needs then, so there's about 60% the previous SHMA identified as being social rented, with 40% being for intermediate housing. But because both of those needs are quite significant, there's often a need then to look at what that individual site can deliver. And the other thing that factors into that is the viability of the housing development that's being delivered and the ability to be able to deliver both those types of affordable housing. So there is often, coupled with what Angela's just described about access to funds, access to match funding, etc., often quite a complicated approach to delivering the best affordable mix that can be delivered on each and every site across Leeds. What I will say is that the SHMA has recently been updated, and those draft findings are pointing to around about a need for 53% social rented, with around 35% intermediate within the city, and the remainder for affordable home ownership. These figures will then help us guide a reset planning policy, which seeks the best mix for sites.
Chair, if I pick up the commuted sums point that I think Councillor Galton was referring to, and to remind members briefly that the commuted sums are those monies that the council collects from developers of mainstream housing sites in lieu of their delivery of affordable housing on site where that has not been obliged for whatever reason through the Planning Commission. And that money is ring-fenced and required to be spent on affordable housing in its formal definition through the National Planning Policy Framework and as reflected in our local plan. And we pool that money, so it becomes available as a relatively flexible resource for us to, I think, as Councillor Galton alluded to earlier, to leverage other funding sources. And I think the important thing to recognise with the commuted sums is that for every sum that we get for a house that hasn't been built on site, it is in itself not enough to deliver a home. So we do need to use that money to grow the resource to make it to give it the additionality it requires. The way we deploy those sums are through our partnership work, through the action plan and the relationships that we have, as we've talked about in the report. We have a pipeline, we have a kind of clear sight of what is coming forward through our partners and where that money can be best deployed to get the best value. We work on the basis of additionality. So in an ideal world, we would use it to deliver social housing where that would not ordinarily have been affordable to the developing partner through their existing funding arrangements. That is not always possible because every site is different. Every site has its own challenges. Sometimes we need to think about how the additionality is defined in terms of actually enabling some affordable housing to come forward, which may not be social rent, it may be affordable rent, but it's always about delivering new additional affordable housing. So yeah, I think that's the simple answer to that one.
Yes, Matthew.
If it's okay, Chair, I'd like to comment on Stuart's questions from a provider point of view. We get grants for building affordable and social rented properties and shared ownership properties around the city, but sometimes the funding doesn't cover all of the costs that are associated with the development. So the commuted sums and something that we use internally called Recycled Capital Grant Fund enables us to make schemes that would otherwise simply not be viable actually become viable because of it. So Sugar Hill is an example of that, where we've had to use a cocktail of funding to enable us to deliver the scheme that without the commuted sums, simply we wouldn't have been able to afford to deliver. And just on the second point, if it makes you feel any better, Leeds Federated Housing Association, the clue's in the title, we've been developing in Wakefield for about 15, 20 years. So, and we've done some joint schemes with Wakefield District Housing as well, and they're a good organisation. So it's not as unusual as you might think for organisations with a slightly different name and maybe even geographical focus to work in a slightly broader geographical area.
Excellent. Thank you, Angela.
I think Matthew's covered the second point. It's not unusual, and RPs don't necessarily have a fixed geographic boundary that aligns with a local authority boundary. They would work within a market that they decide to.
Okay, thank you very much. Board members, any questions or comments? Yes, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just I wonder if someone can just clarify for me regards the S106 housing. How do we set the targets with developers with regards, specific sites? And does that vary from area to area? And also, I'm interested because we've got a large development in South Leeds at the moment where I've got the developer now applying to reschedule the phasing of the building of the whole estate, because what they're finding is they're struggling to sell the £600,000 homes, but they're selling all the affordable homes. So what they're asking now is to bring forward the building of the affordable homes. So I'm just wondering, is that an environment that we can now take advantage of? And when we get developers coming here with their applications, should we be pushing more now for S106 housing? So that was my first question. And then just a very quick one, really, regarding the report. Normally we use a KPI, a very simple one, the core strategy selective review, which normally tells us about how many affordable homes we've delivered against target. I just wonder whether someone could give us an update on that particular measure and just give us a bit of an update of what the backlog is regards supply of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So for section 106, Councillor Foster, the core strategy selective review policy H5 sets out 3 different areas of the city where affordable housing will be sought from new development. And it asks for a proportion of that new development to be affordable. And it does that depending on market viability. So in the outer areas of Leeds, where there's a lot more market value, that level is set at 35%. For the majority of the south of the city and the main urban area, it's set at 15%. And for the city centre and the inner city, it's set at 7%. Because the lower the market value, the less likely it is that you're going to be able to get a developer that will deliver the high numbers of affordable houses. Now, within those policy parameters, that's what the policy seeks. But government guidance makes it very clear, and our policy makes it very clear, that viability can be a reason, individual scheme viability can be a reason from diverting from those targets. So we often see developments coming in, looking at abnormal costs, for example, or other reasons as to why those numbers should be lower. Now, they are then subject to scrutiny by the district valuer to ensure that actually that reasoning is correct and stands up before a determination is made that a planning permission can be granted that sits outside of that policy. Now, I should say that when that policy was developed, it was never done so with the expectation that it would meet in full the housing needs identified in the plan. So those housing needs are quite a strong consideration for us to derive policy, but we do have the market realities that often dampen the on the ground delivery against that expectation. So that's where we look for other forms of affordable housing, such as grant funded direct build from the council, to be able to plug those gaps in terms of meeting overall need. Oh, sorry. In terms of how we're going against targets, did you mean overall housing targets, or did you mean so that the 3,400?
We usually have a KPI that we use that I think it measures the core strategic selective, well, it's called the CCSR target.
Yeah.
And that normally gives you a backlog figure, gives us an idea of how far behind we are on delivering. And I can't see that in this report. I know it's in a later report that we're not going to discuss today, but I would like to know the number.
Councillor Foster, you've got some data there on the targets as well. Have you seen that? Oh, that's not what you're looking for.
Yeah, I have seen that, but what it doesn't actually give is a total figure.
Right.
There's an annual backlog figure, but I'm after the total figure.
I think, conscious Councillor Foster, that you've probably got a lot of business to date. What I can do is I can find that and I can email that round to Scrutiny Board members, if that would help.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Galton. That will be your last question on this agenda. Right.
Thanks, Chair. I'll make sure it's a long one. Two things. They're subsets of the same question. One is the response we had about Wakefield District housing and moving into different areas. One of the things that I think a lot of elected members are quite frustrated about sometimes is when there is a housing association and it hasn't got a geographical association. In the old days, these were mutuals that grew up to meet the needs of a specific community, whereby the affordable housing situation in their locality wasn't being delivered, and so they basically created it themselves. Over time, of course, they've all been bought up like corporates have into great big housing providers, which probably provide greater assurance for outside funders, but don't have any kind of accountability to the local community in terms of the quality of their housing management, etc. So there's a bit of a tension there. So I just wondered, in terms of the housing market that was mentioned before, how local does it go? Because in the report, when it talks about meeting affordable housing needs and how it should be facing onto the needs of the community or whatever, it talks about social characteristics as opposed to specific geographical areas. So, for instance, I know that in the patch where Mike and myself live, there hasn't been any new council housing built for 3 decades until Healy Croft got built in Tingley, but there's still nothing in our area. And then recently, the council gave 2.4 million to Leeds Federated to change the tenure of some of the houses on the Sugar Hill estate from being shared ownership houses to being affordable rentable houses. And I'm thinking, that would be great if they were new council houses, but they're not. They're still owned by a separate organisation. And And it also raised a question for me, do we not want shared ownership houses anymore? And then when I look into the report, it looks like there aren't that many shared ownership houses. And as part of our affordable strategy, we want to ensure that people get onto the housing ladder as well as having affordable rented properties as well. So and there didn't seem to be any local interaction to understand that that was the right decision for that community. So I'm just wanting to know what your housing characteristic areas are for affordable housing in terms of knowing what the need is. How local do they go? Because I know we do in terms of the SHLA.
Okay, what's the question?
Yeah, so I'm interested in that. Thank you.
Thank you. So the existing SHMA against which current policy is based is an overall disaggregation of housing need within Leeds. What we were keen to do through this most updated SHMA, and we've done this partly through a housing survey as well as interrogating lower super output area information against sort of the most up-to-date census, is to do exactly what you've just said, Councillor Galton, and really focus in on the specific needs that are arising within local areas. Now, they give us an understanding not only around sort of affordable need, but also around specific specialist needs, for example, for older persons housing and bungalows and level access accommodation. But the question, so we should see, and it's my intention that we'll see through Leeds Local Plan 2040, a more prescriptive policy around affordable housing that relates to local needs. The second part of your question around shared ownership is slightly complicated by the government's national guidance for a product that it calls first homes, and it requires that 25% of schemes where a developer wishes to deliver homes for ownership should be within a first homes category, and that's quite a prescribed definition. So at the moment as well, what we're doing within the SHMA and the policy development is grappling with that 25%, because obviously if 25% of something is first homes and then we add shared home ownership onto that, you are constraining and squeezing the amount of affordable homes for rent, be they social or intermediate, that you can also achieve. So there's quite a balance to be struck, but that's going to be an active discussion that we have through Leeds Local Plan 2040, which will relate to your reflections about shared ownership and affordable home ownership.
Thank you. Councillor Lennox, you wanted to come in.
So, apologies, I indicated to speak when you said it was the last question of the session, so I was just going to sum up and cover a few things. No, I just wanted to reiterate a few points that a few people made in their introductions. And I think all of us in all of our roles, I think the scale of affordable housing need in the city is never far from our minds. It's always something. And we've heard a lot about the complexity of accessing the funding, of combining the funding, of deciding per site and per scheme how to blend that funding together, especially given that, as has been mentioned, right to buy receipts are not included in that funding. So I think the word that Angela used at the start, which is a transformative few years, I think we can use that word for what's happened in Leeds. I think we can be really proud of the targets that we set ourselves back 5 years ago, and how we are, and as this report shows, how we're delivering against that. But we've heard so much about what we continue to need, and it's covered in the report as well. So the next government must continue to work with councils and providers to unlock that funding, or allow it to be blended in a different way, or tackle the number of homes lost to right to buy. But it's not just about building either. This cocktail of funding, as Matthew said, it's not just about building, it's also about what we can do to reacquire houses, acquire houses from other sites, and retrofit and upgrade existing homes. And it's a whole picture as to how we provide the numbers of affordable houses and affordable housing that we need. So I just wanted to make those points, that we all know that it's something which is an ongoing an ongoing challenge. The new SHMA, I believe, is going to be coming out early this year, which obviously we've been following it along, but it will reset our targets for ourselves. It will reset the picture for what we need to achieve in the new the coming phase of this delivery. But I just wanted to put on record my thanks to the team, because it's the agility with which they approach and come at each new opportunity to try and maximise what we can deliver for the people in housing need in Leeds is just so impressive. So yeah, just to put on record my thanks for that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lennox. Just to refer officers to paragraph 10, when do we anticipate to receive clarity about Future Homes England, the program that is replacing the Homes in England Affordable Homes program that ends in 2025? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this it's a recurring theme. I'm sure Matthew feels it the same. So we obviously have specified programmes, and they have a certain running time. So the current Affordable Homes programme is 21 to 2026. We have our continuous market engagement very much open for business still. We have continuous market engagement ongoing on that, and we also have strategic partners, so partners that have flexibilities and a slightly longer time frame as well to deliver. So it's the time frames for each of the programme. It's been we've had affordable homes programmes for many a year now, and we come against the same challenge, I guess, in terms of kind of the end date of that programme. So we await certainty on the next programme. I can't give any timeframes, I'm afraid, for when that would be. Obviously, there's the comprehensive spending reviews and elections, things like that. So I think we're very much continuing to plan. We're continuing to understand what the pipeline is and what the opportunities are. And I don't know whether Matthew wants to say anything, but certainly I don't think the world of registered providers and partners stops, given kind of awaiting that news. Very much people are still making plans to continue to deliver.
Yeah, thank you, Tasmin. Talking about the strategic partnership that you have just mentioned with other providers. So how is that approach developed?
So the strategic partnerships, we had a good few years ago now, we went through a process of seeking partners to partner up with, and they've entered contracts with us to deliver a number of homes across the country for a certain amount of grant. So that's an approach that we've actually had 3 rounds of strategic partnerships now. So that's something that we've done already, and we've got in place partners such as Guinness, for example, a strategic partners of Homes England.
Yes, Matthew, did you want to come in?
Yes, the point on if the funding only goes up to 2026, how do associations deal with that? We assume it's going to carry on, and there'll be a subsequent announcement, and that's a national policy approach. Just to pick up on Stuart's point earlier, if I may, Chair, about associations not being connected locally, I think his microphone must have gone off before he said present company accepted, because I would argue the Leeds Fed is locally focused. We met, I met the residents of the scheme that we gave an example of, and that's not uncommon, and I'm happy to meet anybody to talk about their schemes. And there are plenty of associations operating in Leeds that have that same place shaping agenda. We exist to help people make a home, and anything we can do to help that is great. And for what it's worth, I'm not on their payroll, but I would say Wakefield and District Housing are of a similar mindset. I know the chief executive there, and that's certainly his approach. And specifically on the shared ownership, are we interested in shared ownership? Yes, we are as a sector. I can't give numbers for the whole sector, but in Leeds Fed, in the year that we're in, within Leeds, we'll build 69 homes. 48 of them are at social rent, 15 of them are shared ownership, and 6 of them are at affordable rent. And oftentimes the makeup of the scheme is dictated by the funding that you're getting. A lot of Homes England funding encourages shared ownership, and there are arrangements through Section 106 that do the same. So we're happy to oblige with that. And clearly there's a demand for all types of property, and we're happy to support that wherever it's necessary.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Whilst you're still there, obviously, with your experience with your housing association and the challenges that you currently are facing, are there any levers that we could actually use in terms of the challenges that we are also facing that we could work together with?
I would say we're already doing that in the partnership approach that we have through the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, probably in particular, which takes a slightly broader geographical perspective. Associations and Leeds City Council and other combined authority councils are working together to share information that doesn't compromise the competition that has to be there, but maximises the combined benefit that we can bring, and where necessary, specific partnership work between local authorities and associations. Again, without wanting to go over it too many times, that Sugar Hill is a great example of. Actually, the relationships between associations and councils is really important to help us help those communities. And so I would say we're doing the things that we need to do already, Chair.
Thank you very much. This is last question from me for officers. In terms of specialist needs houses, what's the delivery on that one at this moment in time?
Thanks, Chair. So in terms of KPIs, we only monitor accessible housing, and I think the report that we've got coming subsequently shows that we're actually in excess of our target for accessible housing. The SHMA will start to set KPIs and targets for older persons housing as well on the basis of needs that have been identified. And off the top of my head, I don't know what those are in the current SHMA, but the SHMA and the policy response to that will be back in front of this scrutiny board as part of its next round of consultation for the local plan 2040.
And Chair, just to add to that, certainly through our own delivery programme, we've addressed a lot of assisted living needs, the latest of which is Gascoigne House at Middleton. And also on our direct delivery sites, we're doing quite a number of bungalows that are catering for working age adults, so that we can really start to address those local needs as well, working with housing leads and meeting the needs that are on their register. And in addition to that, we also work with a number of specialist providers such as Hapentech, who we've worked with in Leeds and have another scheme coming through. So whilst it certainly isn't enough, we are certainly starting to work on all tenure mix and all needs as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Any further comments from members? Are we all happy? No? Councillor Galton, why are you giving that look?
I've had my last question, Chair. I know I have to
Excellent
behave.
for once. Thank you very much. You can hold your peace. All right then. Okay. So thank you very much for all your contributions today. We note the progress made by the council and its partners in delivering of the action plan. And we also agree to an update of the action plan being presented to this board in January 2025. As we've agreed, we would want a 12-month review, if that's all right. So the local plan update as well. This report also references the ongoing development of the local plan for 2040, which Martin has just mentioned. So members are requested. We're asking for a separate update on that one with the local plan for 2040. And that was due to come to our December meeting, but officers asked if that could be deferred until early 2024 and also for 2025. So given the significance of the local plan update for 2040, I can confirm the board still wants to recommend that an update is provided to ourselves. So Becky, could I kindly ask if you would follow that up for ourselves? So apart from that, we just want to say another huge thank you and keep up the good work. Challenges are there, but you know, we shouldn't be afraid to face challenges. That's life. Let's just keeping on. So thank you all so much for coming, and to our guests, thank you so much. We're waiting for your invitation to your Golden Jubilee and wish all of you and your staff every good luck. So thank you all for coming. Next is agenda item number 8. You can all have a 5 minutes break, have a cup of tea. All right, members. Can we begin to come back, please? Thank you. Yeah, it is. Are you cold?
It's a bit chilly, but I'm not.
All right.
It's
What?
it's everybody's doing it. When they come up, they present something that we haven't seen. I couldn't read that PowerPoint thing, and it drives me up the wall. Really does. Anyway, bother me.
All right. Okay, thank you all for coming. Lovely to see you, Martin and his team. Happy New Year. You're all looking bright and cheerful, so hopefully the year should be that way for all of us. Okay, so we're back to agenda item number 8, performance monitoring. So this report is one of our 2 regular updates on performance monitoring, and all the scrutiny boards have received updates on performance in relation to this. So to the key performance indicators within their remits in January and June as well. So much of the format today will therefore be familiar to members. However, I would like to highlight 2 differences in this year's report. And the first one would be on paragraph 2 of page 32, that highlights a range of additional indicators that the board is asked to consider for future reports. So huge thank you again to officers who provided additional information and for the summary of the data available to us. You all know how much I love my data. So thank you so much for that provision. I would welcome the view of members today, whether there are indicators in that list that we would like to see included in future reports. However, I am very, very conscious of time today. So there are areas that I think we need more clarity, and I don't want to run out of time discussing them. So we have agreed earlier on to discuss this at a private meeting. When I say private meeting, in subgroup meeting, so that we can look into this data in more detail, and that's been agreed by all the board members. So thank you very much for that. So an example of the issues to think about, we have regularly discussed the importance of job quality, and I would like to see the level of 0 hours contracts included as well in our future reports. However, the report suggests we can't get that at a Leeds level just yet. So until that is possible, we may want to recommend that we wait until the ONS publishes the statistics at a local authority level, as they have indicated that they will do so. So in contrast, I would recommend including the number of people employed in knowledge intensive business services in future reports as possible, as an indicator of high value employment. So it's very clear to all of us. Now, secondly, is the offlog. That's the second difference to note, is that on page 50 of your report, there is an outline of the metrics being collated by the Office of Local Government since its launch last year. So 3 of the indicators relating to adult skills relate to the remit of this board. So I will now ask the executive members if is there any one of them, any executive member for this portfolio here? I did see Councillor Hayden was here. Oh dear. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, can I ask Martin if you all could kindly introduce yourself and your team who would be speaking on this agenda item today? Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My name is Martin Farrington. I'm the Director of City Development.
Whilst we're checking the microphone, good morning, everybody, and Happy New Year. I'm Eve Rutas. I'm Chief Officer for Culture and Economy.
Good morning, everyone. Gary Bartlett, Chief Officer for Highways and Transportation.
Morning, everybody. I'm David Feeney, Chief Planning Officer.
Good morning, everybody. Angela Barnacle, Chief Officer, Asset Management and Regeneration.
Thank you. We were just waiting for you, Councillor Hayden. Kindly introduce yourself and good to see you.
Sorry about that. Yes, I'm Councillor Helen Hayden and Exec Member for Sustainable Development and Infrastructure.
Thank you all for coming. So we will go through each of the indicators and we will take questions on each before going on to the second one so that we do not lose track of the points that we would like to consider this morning. So I will now start with unemployment in Leeds, if that's okay. Who will be taking us through that? Is it yourself, Eve, or is it Martin?
I'm happy to give a brief précis if that helps.
Yes, please. Thank you.
So in terms of the first indicator, it shows unemployment in Leeds. It indicates that the unemployment rate for July 22 to June 23 stood at 2.6%. So that's a meaningful drop from 4.2%, which relates to 17,000 working age people from the same period in the previous year. By way of contrast, unemployment rate across core cities was 4.8%, and for West Yorkshire 4.2%, and the UK average was 3.8%. So that effectively means that Leeds has the third largest drop in unemployment rates in core cities, from behind Manchester and Sheffield, but it's performing better than Newcastle, Birmingham, Glasgow, Cardiff, Liverpool and Nottingham.
And Chair, just to add some more recent information, Scrutiny members will recall at the last meeting that I highlighted that unemployment numbers are just creeping up very slightly in the more current data, and to let Scrutiny Board members know that we are supporting 8 organisations at the moment who are making redundancies, including having made contact with Communicis, and Scrutiny Board members may have picked up over Christmas that they have gone into administration. And we are having really successful dialogue and outcomes for some of the individuals that are being impacted by those redundancies, just to, again, to reassure Scrutiny members around that activity.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Buckley had a question. Is that on unemployment? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just this figure of 2.6%, which is a remarkably low figure, actually. And I just wondered, given that the average rate across the core cities was 4.8, Yorkshire at 4.2, and the UK average was 3.8, to what do you attribute Leeds' success? Because 2.6 is a very low rate, isn't it?
I would probably put forward two reasons. One, we do have a very strong, still have a strong economy in Leeds. That broad base that we have has meant that we weathered COVID-19 well. Because you have businesses right across different sectors, some who were impacted more extensively during COVID, others that were able to thrive. So that balance in the, in the economy in Leeds means that we have that ongoing strength. I think the second aspect I would point to is that we do have a really excellent employment and skills service and strong partnership between that service and DWP and other partners in the city, as well as with, our education providers, like the further education providers at Leeds City College. There's always more that we can do. But I think that service provides a really targeted approach to supporting individuals who are furthest from the labour market to get into work.
Thank you very much. Next is the new business startups. Any question on the new business startups? Yes, members. Yes, Councillor Galton. And make sure it's a question, not a thesis.
I was wanting to see the differentiation in the business. I'm trying to think of the word now. business types, you know, is it somebody who's setting up a nail parlor? Is it somebody who's setting up a care business? Is it somebody who's, and I would like to see what the different proportion was in each of those different sectors. Is there any chance of having that available in future?
So in the cover report, Councillor Galton, there's reference to a tool that we've now got access to that's provided by the Data City. Which I think could potentially give us a bit more information around this, although I'll need to talk to the team. The frustration that we have is that the SIP codes that are used at Companies House are really out of date. So it's very difficult to get an assessment of business type and sector. They haven't been updated for a really long time. So for example, digital businesses come under something like information and computer technologies, ICT. So it's not fit for purpose for being able to kind of understand the economy which we work with now. The Data City addresses exactly that in that it kind of scrapes all the information across the internet and has major databases which allow you to get a much clearer feel for the economy. So when one of the things I think we probably explore when we have the subgroup discussion is just how we might use that tool to be able to give Scrutiny members a bit more information about some of that sector breakdown in relation to the business stock that we have in the city.
Thank you. Councillor Billifley.
Thanks, Abby. Happy New Year, Eve. I think it's for you. Two questions really linked around unemployment and new business startups. Unemployment has been going down consistently over the last 10 years, down 2/3, I think. Over the same period, new business startups have been pretty flat, apart from 1 year, I think, in 2020. I just wondered, how you sort of correlate those sort of two issues, and linked to that. How do you think the economy in Leeds is doing post-COVID anyway, taking everything into account? And with new working patterns, working from home in particular, do you think that's having a positive or negative effect on the economy of the city? Thanks, Abby.
I think you asked me 3 questions there, Councillor. So I'll try and answer the 3. So I think the first, you were asking about any correlation between unemployment data, low unemployment, and the flatlining on startups. In all honesty, I'd have to talk to the team to understand whether any correlation can really be made, and to look at that in terms of the data set. So I'm happy to do that and come back to you and the wider committee just to determine whether that correlation can be made and whether we can therefore assert anything from that. I think the second question you asked was about how the economy is doing overall in terms of recovering from COVID in the city. I think my overall kind of feedback would be the Leeds economy has recovered well overall from COVID, but there are some very high risk areas this financial year, primarily in areas of the economy that took on significant debt during COVID. So hospitality, for example, where both this kind of twin impacts of COVID-19 and taking on debt, and then being squeezed on the cost profile in terms of the offer to the public, will, I think, potentially result in seeing businesses, unfortunately, closing as a result. Certainly, it's common in January to see that happening, and people may have picked up high-profile closures in hospitality elsewhere in the country that were kind of in the news over Christmas time. I must say, there's nothing to indicate. We haven't got any informal insight into this, but it's just, I think, something we should be concerned about, given the level of debt that hospitality businesses had to take on through COVID. My other concern looking into 2024 would be the potential implications at a global strategic scale around the sewers, and the potential for that to kind of have an impact on supply chains and costs for both retail and other parts of the economy. So I think it's something that we'll need to be aware of through the year, is how that might flow through into the economy in terms of impacts on inflation, and whether that then flows through to businesses. the trends around unemployment and seeing that slight increase, I think, is definitely an impact of increase in interest rates of last year. And so you would expect some, some changes in the economy as a result of that. And again, we just need to keep an eye on that to determine whether that is just a small change or whether it might become, more significant. But I think overall, I would remain really positive. The third question you asked was about working from home and trends from working from home and how that's impacting. So there's a question we've been asked over the kind of years since COVID. I think there was a big reset by many companies post-COVID on the office space that they wanted. So during COVID, a lot of leases expired for businesses, but actually for the most part, businesses didn't give up office space. They took out new leases on spaces in the city, which they then changed how they were using those spaces. So they might have incorporated more collaboration space, more meeting rooms, fewer desks, because the nature of the way that people are using offices is different to what it was before. So there was a lot of busyness through kind of 21, 22, where businesses were kind of reshaping the space they needed in the city. So that was kind of part of the reset that happened. We saw last year a real kind of strong return for people to the office, particularly during the core days of the week. So during Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we do see quieter days on Mondays and Fridays, which is reflected in footfall. But again, we'll need to keep a kind of view on the market in terms of what happens with office space through this year, based on interest rates last year and approach through. Hope that helps, Chair.
Yes, it does. Just talking about trends. I know before Christmas, you did tell us the digital sector in Leeds has kind of bucked up with the national trend. Is that still on? Is that still moving up in terms of comparison to how it started?
We haven't had new data since the last time we spoke at Scrutiny Committee, but thanks, Martin. My battery's run out to the other side. We haven't had new data since the last time I reported to Scrutiny Committee. Indications would suggest that the digital sector is still successful, although there is a slight cooling off in the amount of recruitment that's going on, but still a lot of recruitment happening into the sector. So I think we should remain positive about that sector in the city.
Okay, thank you. Did you have a supplementary question? Okay.
Just a couple of clarifications. It wasn't so much the correlation between the flatlining of the new business startups and unemployment. It's really where the unemployed people have actually gone to. I think linked to what Abby was saying about and perhaps Stuart, about the quality of the jobs they've gone to. I don't know if you have that level of detail, not necessarily today, but it's sort of sometime in the future. More generally on the working from home business, it's certainly had an effect on footfall. It's having an effect on bus usage and various other things. Do you think has it had a positive effect or a negative effect? I know that's a pretty ethereal sort of type question, but in your experience or view, has it been either one?
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. So on the point about the further clarification on correlation, that's really helpful. And again, I think it's something we can explore when we look at the potential indicators we could include. So suggest we do that. The kind of working from home piece, I think overall it's a positive thing, in the sense that we've got a very tight labour market, and the policy of allowing staff to be able to have some flexibility means that we have more inclusive working practices. So for people that have caring responsibilities at either end, whether they're looking after elderly parents, whether they have children and they have responsibilities about potentially wanting to be able to pick those children up or to be able to support elderly family members, it's got to be a good thing that there's flexible working practices in place that allow people to be able to stay in work and to be able to potentially, fulfill some of those areas of their life. It also, I think, is a positive thing, that it means that 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 people are allowed to kind of achieve that balance better about both their working life and other areas. So I think overall it's a positive thing. From what I'm hearing from employers, for some businesses where they went, where they haven't pushed people to come back into the office for a number of days in the week, they are now going to start to do that. Because what they've found is where they haven't kind of maybe pulled back a bit from policy during COVID, during the pandemic, where people were working from home 5 days a week, is that they're now struggling with productivity because they need those staff to be working together more, to be learning, to be developing and growing. But equally, just before Christmas, I heard from an employer who, where they've gone completely to home-based contracts, but it's really working, but they've got a really fantastic office. And so it's working for them because staff are coming together and want to come into the office to work together on when it counts and when it really matters. So it's a trend, I think, that is only going to continue. Employers' challenge is to work out what the right balance is and how you kind of create a workplace that's really inclusive whilst also very productive. And obviously different sectors will have different requirements around that. So I expect it's still going to keep evolving. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I was going to make a similar point to Councillor Goulton about the type of startup that we're seeing in the city. I did see in a report that I think you get your numbers on startups from a number of new business accounts being opened. So I wondered whether the banks would have information about the type of startup as opposed to the company house data, if that's not very useful. Do we have any sort of working partnerships with any banks, or are they sort of too international for us to have a relationship with like that? Yeah, in December we had a special scrutiny meeting about business support, and we heard about the really amazing business support offer that we've got in Leeds and just how much of it there is. And I know that in particular there is business support directed specifically at startups. So again, I wondered whether if one thing that all startups do is set up a bank account, what's the potential for sharing that business support offer with them via their banks? Maybe they already do that, I don't know. So that was just a secondary thought, but yeah, really a question about our relationship with the banks, and do we have one, and what can we get out of it?
So thank you for the question. Yes, we do have kind of working relationships with the banks, and some of our growth managers who Phil referenced at the previous meeting that are part of that growth team will meet with banks to understand what their offers are to startups as well, because obviously banks also provide extra support. NatWest has an accelerator for startups. Lloyds are establishing an accelerator for startups as well, which they're looking to launch this year. So, there's a range of products and services that are provided. So what our growth managers do is try and build those relationships to understand what the bank offer is, so they can be cross referrals between the two, in the sense of the banks being aware of what Adventure, which is the programme you were referring to, can offer those businesses if it's right. Equally, we get banks involved in some of the free events where we're providing advice and so on. So there's an ongoing relationship there. Data is a bit of a trickier one. Clearly banks, it's a competitive situation where banks are kind of competing for those companies to have their bank account with them. However, I do think the data city I referenced earlier is the right place to go, because most businesses do create websites, and so there is a huge amount of information that you can get just by scraping the web to get a really, really clear feel for where startups are appearing and in what sectors and of what nature, and also when they're folding. So I think that's probably the route down which we can provide more of a sense ongoing of how things are changing in the economy and the nature of businesses that are starting up.
Thank you very much, Eve. We need to move on swiftly. Now, the next is about business scale-ups. I don't think we need to say more on that one because the report hasn't changed anyway since June, so I'm going to jump that. Business survival rates as well. You already have actually said most of that in terms of the pre-pandemic position and where we are now. So I would jump that as well, and we'll go straight to affordable homes as well. We just covered that. So members, if you don't mind, we can jump that as well. So next will be the number of people killed or seriously injured in road traffic collisions. Any question on that? Yes, Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. And if you'll indulge me, it corresponds to some of the earlier points that you've jumped as well. I'm intrigued in the timescales in the tables because it measures January to September for two consecutive years. And I'm thinking, why isn't it a full year? What's the problem with winter? I noticed some of the others were very strange measuring periods as well. April to September 2022 to April to September 2023 for number of affordable homes. Is there a particular explanation for those timescales?
Yes, there is. Basically, it relates to these need to be ratified by the police. And so these figures are the latest for this period leading up to this date here. So hopefully that covers that off. For example, we do
not quite, no.
Well,
so what happens to the months that don't appear? So, for instance, what happened to September 2022 to December 2022?
Oh, so they are available. We're just in this report here. Someone has decided that we just compare those periods, but we normally do calendar years, and that's how we do it. But for, let's say, for 23, we're looking at those figures now, but they won't be ratified by the police for several months now because there's a time delay in the process of them entering the data onto their systems and then coming through onto the software that we use. But you'll see in due course that we will compare calendar years, but it's just a matter of ratifying the data.
Yeah, that's fine. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Flynn.
Thanks very much. Gary, you didn't make the call in last week, and it's a question I raised at the previous call in. Killed and seriously injured on the roads, I think fell fairly consistently until 2013 and has remained more or less static ever since, despite all of the money that we've ploughed into improving road safety. And I just wondered what you thought the reason for that actually was. Difficult to know what's happened over the last 12 months, of course, but could you give us an idea of why you think that's happened?
Well, interestingly, I've just read a report earlier today in terms of calls from national road safety groups to highlight exactly this point, that up to the period up to 2010, and I may not got the statistics exactly right because I just read it this morning, something like there was a 46% reduction in KSIs. Since that period, that reduction has only been 5%. So something has changed, and whether it's because there might be a couple of reasons here in terms of, has there been enough focus, let's be blunt about it, at a national level on road safety and national campaigns that many of us will remember, like the seatbelt ones of many years ago, the green cross codes that I remember growing up, showing how old I am now. But you don't see those to a large extent now. And certainly as officers, we are pushing for those to be done again, obviously in updated formats because of the seriousness of the issue. I think there's also an issue around, so you've got that national basis for it, but also as authorities and as officers, we recommend and we obviously concentrate on those sites where we know we can have a positive impact pretty quick. So you can think of sites where, if you like, we've picked the low hanging fruit, and where there've been really remarkable changes where we've intervened, you can get minimum of 50% reduction in casualty rates. But those sites have been treated now, so the ones that are left are more difficult to deal with. And so a lot of the issues that we have on our roads relate to single vehicle collisions, late at night, drink, drugs, and they are largely, and you'll have heard this phrase before, beyond engineering influence. And it becomes a more of a behavioural change thing. And that obviously takes much longer. And that's why in other fora, you will have heard us talk about Vision Zero and the need for everybody, not just highway authorities, to own the need to reduce speed, don't drink and drive, wear your seatbelts, plan ahead, take a bit more time, don't rush, because it's that behavioural change that it needs to happen now, which then takes you back to the national campaigns that I mentioned as well. So I think there are a number of factors. Hope that helps.
Do remember the Green Cross Code man, Dave Prowse, actually. He's been dead about 5 years now, I think. I'm particularly interested because whenever we consider a new road scheme or whatever, one of the reasons why the changes are being implemented is to improve road safety record and all the rest of it. You've covered pretty much what I was asking anyway, Gary. But I think I'd like a bit more information on solid information as to why the figures have stopped falling over the last 10 years. You said 2010. My information was 2013. That was in I always call it the year zero report that we saw last September. So not necessarily today, but I would like more information on that. A bit more research, perhaps.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Speaking about when you came in September, what's our progress in terms of the regional approach to Vision Zero?
That's okay. That's a big question to answer quickly. There's a lot of work going on across West Yorkshire, particularly around speed camera work and an emphasis on that. And you will know that in Leeds we've introduced the first average speed camera system permanently on the outer ring road, and anecdotally, it's too early to judge statistically at this moment in time. It seems to be working well and changing driver behaviour on that route, which is encouraging. There is also a step up in the level of enforcement that's taking place across the city. Again, and that's, and I emphasise here, the idea here is not to catch people. This is about trying to ultimately is to change people's behaviour over time so that they just don't speed. Ideally, we don't want to catch anybody. But if you do want to speed, the point is you will get caught in Leeds. That's the message we want to get across. A big emphasis of the work going forward is around the comms side of it, and colleagues at the Combined Authority who we work closely with are in the process of appointing a comms person that will spend a lot of time working on West Yorkshire Vision Zero initiatives, which hopefully will help pick up on some of the more regional campaigns that I just alluded to in terms of the context of national campaigns. So I think those are the broad main points at this point in time, but I know we will come back to scrutiny where we can provide more further detail on Vision Zero. But there is a head of steam on there. We've been out to all the community committees, and hopefully word is getting out now that what Vision Zero is about, and we need to all continue to spread that word.
Thank you. We did welcome the installation of the first average speed cameras when you came in September. Have we got any updates on that?
Not statistically just yet. Bit too early for that. But hopefully in the next few months, and certainly the next update to scrutiny, we should have, because we want to see that as well. But the feedback we do get from residents and some councillors has been that driver behaviour has changed. There's a calming down, and those very high excessive speeds that were being reported to us have hopefully been reduced, because clearly they will get caught in that process. And again, it's my hope and my recommendations will be that we extend that average speed camera system to other parts of the ring road as soon as we can.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That was actually going to be my next question if we are planning to have additional cameras elsewhere. Thank you. Councillor Hayden and then Councillor Galton.
And just to add to that, because the cameras that were on the ring road have been deployed to the A647, thank you very much. So that's increased capacity, because there are obviously not average ones, but the employment of the average speed cameras has allowed those previous cameras to be deployed on a very worrying part of the highway infrastructure, where there is a lot of traffic, and when people are able to speed, then they do so. So hopefully that will, and they're going in this month. So hopefully that will change things on the A647 as well.
Thanks, Chair. I was just looking again at the figures on page 47. And it correlates with previous comments about working from home. So the lowest figure for road traffic casualties is during lockdown. So it went right down to 310. And then it goes back up again 2021, and then it's really ramped up this year. And I'm just wondering, one of the reasons why it might have ramped up this year. So it's all to do with, I assume, the inference is car usage. And I wondered if this year's car usage was made worse because of how appalling the public transport system was in terms of the reliability and frequency of bus services, forcing more workers who are being asked to go back into the office to do the commute. So I think it would be really helpful for the suggestion that Gary made earlier that we should have those time-related, what's the word, data. So if Gary's telling us that quite a lot of these are to do with non-manageable, drug-related, drug-fueled individuals injuring themselves, as opposed to people on the commute driving too fast so they're not being late for work, that would be really useful, I think, in terms of us having a more sophisticated approach to how we tackle this, because the enforcement that Gary mentions that he says is being enhanced, I don't recognize it in my patch. So I'm not sure where that enforcement is taking place, particularly given the spread of 20-mile-per-hour zones that neighborhood policing teams are often very reluctant to do any enforcement of. So yeah, I think that differentiation in terms of when things are happening, like midweek, weekend, morning, evening, would be really useful for considering this in the future.
Yeah, the 2020 figures are stark, aren't they? And they clearly reflect the national lockdowns. Some of the increases, and it is covered in the report, relate to the new way of that the police record collisions and the introduction of the new crash system. It is covered in the report, which has resulted in this sort of uptick, significant uptick, not just in our figures, but nationally as well, in all highway authorities where the crash system has been introduced by the police. There's been this increase. But the essence here is, behind some of this, is that we do want people to use public transport, because speed, it's not just drink drug, obviously, it's speeding, carelessness, not planning ahead, all those other things I touched on as well, play a factor in collisions. And if people can use public transport where it's appropriate to do so, that helps our situation, and that's why we push that. And we do want to see improvements in public transport, both train and buses. And we know over the last 12 months there have been some particular difficulties in those industries, but hopefully 24 will see an improvement in that. And some of the figures that are obviously not here at the moment, because they still need to be ratified for 23, do show signs of improvement. which you will see at future scrutiny meetings. But we can't get too excited yet because there's still a long way to go, and yeah, there's still a lot of people being hurt and killed on our roads.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we will try not to get too excited. Yes, Councillor Hayden.
Going back to the comment about the lockdown and then behavioural drivers driving in a certain particular way, on average, we did see an uplift in dangerous driving really and in speeding, but that was a national thing. It was not just in Leeds or West Yorkshire, it was a national thing. And whether it was some kind of psychological effect of the roads being clearer in lockdown, and then obviously people returning to driving, getting into a different way of driving than they had done previously. Also, the lack of congestion. Congestion slows people down because they're stuck in a traffic queue. So getting back behind them without the congestion that there used to be, it used to take me, if I set off around 5 from here to home in Halton, York Road would take me a good half an hour. I can always do it now in 15 minutes. So it's, and because it is clear, because we don't have the kind of congestion that we did pre-pandemic. So it's a different way of using our roads, and there has been this national trend of poor driver behaviour. And I'm not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, so but I'll leave it to better people to know why that occurred.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hayden. Okay, I will now need to move on. For satisfaction with transport services, the report hasn't changed since June. So is that on transport services or before that? All right, sure.
Just a bit of feedback, Chair, sorry. In terms of average speed cameras, I've had positive comments. I've not had any negative comments from anyone in relation to that. And just personally, I discussed that this morning in our pre-meeting, the Armley gyratory. I know it's not finished yet, but it's fantastic. So thank the team for that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You can just keep going around that roundabout with a smile on your face. So that's great. Well done. Thank you very much. Okay, so yeah.
Thank you very much. I mean, Armley is now coming up to 2 years since we started it. I say we, I didn't get a shovel out. But it's been a huge piece of work, and we're already seeing, without it being finished, a 23% uplift in traffic flow around the Armley gyratory. So it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and keeping traffic flowing and keeping traffic to an appropriate road system, as well as enabling cycling and much better walking for people to use that to travel. So, and that will all come to fruition when it's totally finished. But no, thank you for highlighting that.
Thank you very much. Very commendable. So we look forward to its completion. Thank you very much. So I did say for the satisfaction with transport services, I'm going to move on from that one because nothing has changed since the report in June. So next is the city centre footfall, and the report notes that our benchmarking suggests the footfall remains at 15% lower than the pre-COVID level. So do we yet have an indication of footfall in the city centre over the Christmas period?
We know it went up quite considerably, Chair. I'll just try and find you an update.
Yeah, even if it's anecdotal, that'll be fine.
While Martin's
Like I
doing,
say, it's up 11.4% across the whole Christmas market period. So we found that the Christmas market helped to boost footfall in the city centre, and it was 11.4% up over that period. So that was very positive, and alongside that, the skate sessions at Millennium Square added to footfall as well.
Thank you very much. You're welcome, Councillor Pryor. Good to see you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Just to briefly add to the footfall, we've had 2 of the largest Saturdays.
Sorry, just introduce yourself so that the public know who you are.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Councillor Jonathan Pryor, I'm Deputy Leader and Executive Member for Economy, Culture and Education. 2 of the Saturdays just prior to Christmas were the busiest Saturdays we've ever had in the city centre, larger than pre-pandemic. And just looking at footfall figures for 2014, every single day bar the 1st of January has been up on 2022, anywhere between up 1.4% and up 31.1%. The 1st of January was down slightly, but that's largely because the Monday of the 1st of January doesn't match up with when the 1st of January was in 2022, so it's not comparing like for like. New Year's Day is usually down, whereas New Year's Eve is usually quite significantly up.
Any other questions? Yes, Martin.
Just as another piece of helpful information, the Office of Rail Regulation published their figures in terms of station footballs, and for the last calendar year, Leeds Station was again the busiest station in the north of England. So its recovery rate is ahead of national trends.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you very much. Any other contributions or questions? Okay, I'll now move on to planning applications. I have been advised that there is just a little input that needs to be added to the report. So I have been asked to actually read that out so that it's noted. So it's just a point of clarification, and it's required in relation to the first sentence of the report under section 11. So that's on planning applications. And that sentence should actually read, performance against major applications in time that are the largest and often the most strategically important applications to the city has dropped when compared with Q1, which should be 92.5%. But the determination rate is an increase above the same period last year and is still significantly higher than the statutory determination targets. So I have been asked to specifically mention that to each and every one of you. So the report references streamlining systems to improve efficiency, and that's on page 49 of your report. So can I ask officers to give us a bit more information about what that means in practice, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, in terms of the overall position, there has been a drop in planning application numbers, but in terms of our performance and ability to determine those applications, we've been progressing a number of measures that were set out in earlier service reviews. We had 2 planning service reviews back in 2020, looking at both development management, which is the part of the service dealing with planning applications, and also strategic planning, which is the part of the service dealing with plan making. And essentially what we've been trying to do is to establish protocols, new systems, new ways of working to sort of improve our back office infrastructure, if you like, as well as streamlining the application processes themselves. So what we've been trying to do is to front load the processes by establishing new processes through protocols and procedures. The other measure that we've introduced is to have pre-application service so that we can consider planning applications at a very, very early stage with applicants to try and front load some of the issues, to iron out any particular challenges or to identify particular technical matters that applicants need to take into account prior to submitting a formal application, which may introduce a delay in the process if that information isn't available when we're trying to take the application forward at that time. So it's a combination of factors, Chair, based on all of those improvement commitments within the service. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments, questions on planning applications? Excellent. Next is on offlog, and I think I've got a question for Councillor Pryor. Can we request an explanation of what is included in as education and skills achievements in the data that's in the report, and how do we act as a convener in Leeds to support adult education? So you're looking at page 50. If not, I mean, anyone else, Eve, if you want to help as well, that'll be. That's on the offlog.
Sorry, Chair, just wanting to be clear how we work with the adult education.
How we can support as conveners in Leeds, how we can support adult education.
So obviously we manage the adult education budget that comes to the council through our employment and skills service. And we have a really a strong set of formal arrangements between ourselves and the combined authority about how that adult education budget is spent, and clear kind of reporting and governance. And that includes some of our own delivery around adult education. And we were subject to an Ofsted review just before Christmas around our adult education provision. We haven't received the draft report yet, but we will be able to share with Scrutiny the outcome of that Ofsted report later this month, we hope, in terms of hearing back from them. And that will allow us to share with you some of the really fantastic work that the team does in convening and working with skills providers across the city. So I'll keep my powder dry, Chair, if that's all right, on that one, in terms of coming back to you, because I think we'll have a great opportunity to discuss that when we get the Ofsted report.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you very much. All right. Members? Excellent. Right, that brings us to the end of that agenda item. Moving on swiftly, agenda item number 9, initial budget proposals. Just waiting for additional officers to join us, board. Okay, thank you all for those joining us for this agenda item. So for the benefit of members of the public who are watching the webcast, the executive board's budget proposals were referred to scrutiny for consideration and comments on the 13th of December. So initial working groups took place for all 5 scrutiny boards in December, so members could discuss the proposals in detail. So the comments and conclusions of all the scrutiny boards will be summarized in a joint report that is submitted to this executive board in February. So when the executive board refers the final budget proposals to council, its members will need to report how they have taken account of any recommendations made by the scrutiny boards. So to avoid us covering the same ground as we did in December, if you all remember, I am proposing that I summarize the points raised in the working group, which I did say to each and every one of you during our pre-meeting, so that we can save ourselves some time. And then if members have additional comments or questions, we can deal with those afterwards. So I would like Michael, if there's anybody in the team that needs to introduce themselves that have not done so, please kindly use this moment to introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Everett and I support City Development. I'm the head of finance.
Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jane Wallen. I'm the Chief Officer for Active Leads and Operations.
Thank you very much both for joining us. So before I read out the summary, would you like to make any introductory comments? Michael?
Yep, thanks, Chair. This item, it provides the board with the proposed budget report for 24-25. Overall, there's an increase in budget from of 36.5 million from 573.4 million to 609.8 million. That's the overall figures. But within the report, there are the specific savings proposals relating to the directorate, which were presented to both the October and the December executive boards. So to recap, the overall gap to be addressed, i.e. the difference between the budgetary pressures and resources available, was 58.4 million. And of that 58.4 million, 8.06 million has been proposed by the City Development Directorate. And as we saw when we held the working group prior to Christmas, the proposals relevant to this scrutiny board were about 6.2 million of that 8 million for the directorate. Once again, as in previous years, the savings have been classified as service reviews, which require meaningful consultation, and also business as usuals, which can be implemented under the council's delegated decision-making framework. So you can see the specific proposals starting at page 144 in the report. So you can also see in the report actually that the city development budget will reduce in 24-25 as a result of the savings proposals, but not by as much as the 8 million might suggest, because there's budget pressures that take the budget the other way, if you see, such as pay awards and price inflation, that sort of thing. So I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michael. So board members, just to remind us about what we covered in December so that we don't have to go through them again now. So the main issues were future investment in the planning service to ensure the council can meet new deadlines for accelerated decision making. Engagement with the trade unions about potential service redesign and staffing reductions. We welcomed the innovative approach to securing external funding for services, including business support. We saw assurance about the level of risk in the directorate's budget proposals. We also expressed concern about staffing reductions, especially where service demand is high and in income generating services. We also spoke about locality buildings review. We spoke about the extension of arrangements for the West Yorkshire Investment Zone, service redesign, street lighting, and members also recommended the prioritization framework is shared with members so that we can understand the classification of services. So that's the summary from our December's meeting. So I will now ask members if you've got any questions or comment. Yes, Councillor Buckley.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This was page 117 at 8217. It's a reference to the abolition of the housing advisory panels, the HAPs. And I wanted to get this clear, actually, because it seemed to me a great pity that we're advocating closing these down, because the council tenants who sit on these panels do it for nothing. It's entirely voluntary, and they suggest things like we need a new handrail here or a new path there, and it just seems such a good way of doing small jobs for the community. And I just wanted to ask the question, really, will there be a saving? Because surely these little jobs will still need doing and will still have to be identified by somebody. So will there be a saving there? Perhaps you could clarify that for me.
Thank you, Chair. I'll look to Michael, but I don't think that sits within the directorate's budget. Is it adult social care or is it housing? It's a housing revenue account budget issue, Chair. It's not a matter I could comment on, I'm afraid.
Okay. Right, Councillor Galton, Councillor Galton, I've just been told that it will be picked up by your board.
Right.
Honestly. Okay. Yes. Is that okay, Councillor Buckley? It's only an additional meeting that you will attend.
It's what?
You can attend Councillor Galton's scrutiny, because that will be discussed in his board.
Okay.
Is that all right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just an hour. I'm sure you'll be all right with that, won't you? Excellent. Right. Any other questions? Very good. Okay. Right. In terms of the highway service review, the service review states that all highways and transportation staff will be eligible for flexible retirement, and some teams will also have access to the voluntary leaver scheme. How are we ensuring that people are leaving on the right people are leaving in the right areas, and we're retaining staff where we need them to be?
in terms of certainly early retirement, the VLS system, we are targeting it in very specific areas. So that isn't open to everyone across the service. And I think the detailed report relating to highways and transportation covers that on page 227. The early retirement angle is a bit broader than that, and each request will be considered on its merits in conjunction with my two heads of service.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a sense yet of what the levels of interest in the voluntary schemes are likely to be?
Chair, yes, we have early indications of the numbers, the likely numbers that have requested figures. What we don't have yet is the reaffirm numbers. So we're still in a period of assessing the feedback to staff that they've received before they come forward and reaffirm whether they want to progress or not. So I would have thought by the end of this month, we'll be in a position to be able to present some further detail.
Thank you very much. Councillor Galton.
Thank you, Chair. It's a related question, really. On page, I can't tell, it hasn't got a page number, but on the table which talks about the different saving proposals and the description of them, I think it might be page 145. It talks about how you're going to get £500,000 additional income associated with new posts. There was an issue in highways and transportation not so long back, whereby it was very difficult to deliver any community-based schemes because most officers were associated with, and this was what we were told at the time, significant projects which were paid for through things like West Yorkshire Combined Authority, Transforming Cities Fund projects, and major development associated projects. And I just wanted to understand, given the review that you're having of staffing and whatever, what proportion of highways and transportation staff are actually dependent upon this outside project-based income for their wages, as opposed to those members of staff which are actually just on a normal council payroll, if you see what I mean?
I have two services under me, obviously transportation and highways. On the highway side, which is predominantly the civil engineering side, that's largely related to scheme type work where there is grant coming in. So that side of the service is heavily dependent on that grant coming in and generating income and recharging their time. And they have successfully done that for many years, certainly well over a decade, 15 years or so. And there is sufficient work. I just need to say that we are heavily supported by consultancy partners, and there are hundreds of other people that support our work in which they charge their time to schemes as well. That gives you a feeling for the scale of work that we do, because I'm almost preempting the next question in terms of the surety of the jobs around the highway civil engineering team. On the transportation side, this is more of the front end of our work in terms of developing policy and road safety. And in some areas that's easy to charge to schemes and to recharge staff time. In some areas it's not. For example, going into schools and road safety education training, that's more difficult because that isn't a capital recharge area. So it is split across the two services quite heavily on the civil engineering side, less so on the transportation side. That is part of the detailed work that we do with finance colleagues to see how that breaks down each month, each year, and we seek to recharge where we can to reduce the burden on council revenue.
And what proportion do you think that is? Is it 80-20, 70-30?
I wouldn't like to guess on the top of my head. I don't know if Michael might have that figure. Otherwise, we'd have to come back, Chair, if that's okay.
Of course, if you haven't got it, feel free to.
I think it's best to calculate that figure and come back on that one, Gary.
Happy for you to come back. Okay, yes, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Chair. I just wonder, I'm not quite sure if this is appropriate for this section, but the £50 million that was returned by WICA to the 5 authorities, local authorities, can someone give me a good insight into how that whole episode began? Where did the money originate from? And when it went to WICA, what were they supposed to do with it? And why didn't they do what they were supposed to do with it? Who opened up the conversation? Did we ask for the money back, or did WICA simply offer it back because they didn't need it? And then now that it's come back, what exactly is going to happen to that money?
Well, I'll share my understanding, but I have to caveat that I wasn't party to any of the specific meetings or discussions, Chair. The 17 million that was returned to Leeds was Leeds money. And when that comes back to Leeds, then it's a decision ultimately for members and advised by the Chief Finance Officer as to what we would do with it as discretionary money. And because of the council's financial position, my understanding is that it will help to supplement our reserves and our financial position, given the significant strains on the revenue budget. And I think, as I understand it, that money arose because when the combined authority looked at its level of expenditure relative to delivery of schemes, there was a surplus remaining, that schemes weren't moving forward. Some schemes were stuck and not moving forward. So there was a decision to take as to whether to reallocate that to other transport requirements, or, given the financial circumstances, return it to the local authorities. And my understanding is that through those discussions, the decision was taken by the 6 parties, so the combined authority in the 5 districts, to return it in proportion to how it was originally provided. So if anyone party wants to clarify any of that, but that's my understanding, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. You've got a supplementary question?
Please. I mean, you say they returned it because it was possibly surplus to requirements, but WICA have already cancelled an £11 million project that should have gone through my ward with the bus prioritisation corridor from Leeds to Wakefield. So that doesn't make sense. And also there's Leeds City Council projects to put a corridor through from the White Rose to Dewsbury. That's another £12 million project that's been cancelled because of lack of funds. And I was just trying to establish whether this £50 million was supposed to be paying for that. But anyway, that's just a comment.
Councillor Hayden.
Clarified, those 2 schemes that Councillor Foster mentions were obviously not just Leeds schemes, or Leeds and Wakefield schemes, so they were run by WICA. Sorry, they were managed. They haven't been, there's been more a pause and a cancellation and a reconfiguring of them, and that's mainly due to inflation. And that is what Martin was referring to, as some projects have got stuck because prices have escalated far quicker than the schemes were able to progress. But I think those kind of questions, and it's not £50 million that Leeds has got back, it's 17 million. It was more like times 50 million across the 5 authorities. And it wasn't that 17 million was allocated to these particular schemes and then has gone back to us. I think it's more a question for the West Yorkshire Combined Authority and how their decision-making process, in discussions with the 5 local authorities, how it came to that. But those, it's more a reconfiguration and a pause of those schemes mainly due to inflation.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Hayden. Yes, Councillor Galton, a
Thank you,
question,
Chair.
not a sermon.
It was helpful, actually. I can give Councillor Foster some previous paperwork around the decision to delay those schemes in the inflation review, which I've got, which I'm happy to share. The question is around arts and heritage and asset management and regeneration, Chair. There was a decision. Sorry, Martin, was that?
I was saying arts and heritage isn't part of this scrutiny.
Oh, I beg your pardon. But it involves asset management and regeneration. Is that part of your remit? Unfortunately, the papers that we were given for this agenda just covered the entire council budget. So nobody had bothered to create anything that was useful for us as a team. So we had an issue in Rothwell where there was a decision by asset management to discontinue a lease for a community centre in our area. And they thought, well, you've got more than one community centre, so we can move the groups out that meet in that community centre somewhere else. One of them was our local youth club. It actually turns out, because they didn't consult with the youth club, the other community centres that were available were not suitable because they didn't meet the safety regulations for looking after children. Anyway, to cut a long story short, the council decided that the youth club should be allowed back into the building. So the building remains officially closed, but it's still delivering council services. The council is getting less income from community centre users because it can't officially be available for hire, and it's still paying for the lease. And one of the reasons why that situation is happening, which is ridiculous, is because the council...
Sorry, Councillor Galton, what is the question?
I'm just getting to the point, Chair, because the council did not actually look at the lease itself that they were hoping to end and did not know what the caveats were within it and what would be the expectation on them should they wish to release that lease. So, Chair, the question is, there is another lease which is being released and it's being overseen, I assume, by asset management, and that is to do with Thwaite Mills. So I'm just checking to see whether or not the due diligence has been done, that that lease agreement has been reviewed, and that there will not be any detrimental circumstances from withdrawing from that lease with the Canal and Rivers Trust.
Thank you. Just to let officers know, Councillor Galton is sobbing, so he wouldn't know some of the things in our remit. So just to put that down, well, please answer his question. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Galton. I think lessons have been learnt from services reviews and consulting with due diligence on the lease requirements and the length of lease for the site in Rothwell. In terms of Thwaite Mills, we have an ongoing dialogue with the Canals and Rivers Trust, who are the freehold owner of that site, and we are able to break that lease at any point, obviously subject to the dilapidations claim and subject to the right termination provisions in that lease. So it is an ongoing dialogue that we have with the Canals and Rivers Trust, and that is happening through my team, where we are supporting Eve's team in terms of her service review.
Thank you very much, Angela. Happy? You should be. Okay, I am going to bring this agenda item to a close. Thank you all so much for all your contribution. And could I kindly ask Becky to ensure, please, that all comments are reflected in the joint report for the executive board. So thank you all for your contribution. Agenda item number 10. We're not going to be long now. Pilot regarding the display of third-party comments online in respect of planning applications. So I believe you, Councillor Hayden, that's your team. Is there anyone new that hasn't introduced themselves? To please kindly introduce yourselves now, please. Thank you. And all other officers who have attended this agenda item, thank you very much for coming.
Chair, my colleagues, Jonathan Carr is Head of Development Management and Helen Sorotti, who's Head of our Business System and Support team, joining for this item. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us. So in June of 2023, the council began a 6-month pilot project to no longer publish third-party comments on planning applications online. So the executive member asked our scrutiny board to consider the outcome of the pilot project after a 6-month period. So this 6-month period pilot has now come to an end, and this report sets out the outcomes of that particular pilot. So I will ask officers to now deliver their introductory comments, please, on this agenda item. Thank you very much.
If I may, Chair, if I could start this item, please. Thank you. So, as you say, in June 2023, we undertook this trial, this 6-month trial of not publishing public comments on the planning portal. And it was really driven by a desire to have improved performance, but also in these very financially challenging times, see if officer time and practice could be better served actually working on applications rather than the very complex task of monitoring and evaluating and taking down unsuitable comments on the public and when the portal planning comments were public on the portal. This would lead, we hoped, to a financial saving, and we are very constrained, and also, you know, a use of officers and what they're trained to do and their professionalism, but also there was a real risk that we could be subject to non-compliance with the statutory, especially statutory legislation, especially GDPR, and that we could be open to legal challenge and therefore the financial risk that would bring the council if any comments were not taken down that should have been taken down. There was a real concern, and it's a real concern of the team and myself about staff well-being as well. We're having to deal with some of the, and as councillors, we have had training on and have actually seen examples of which have had to be redacted because of the language used, and the kind of really disgraceful, discriminatory abuse that could appear in some of these comments. The team and myself were really concerned about staff wellbeing and having to, and then the risk to them that if they didn't deal with these comments as they should do, for whatever reason, and it wouldn't have been any not wanting to, but something might get missed, we're all human, etc., what that would do for their mental health and well-being. So the team has worked really hard on making improvements to the portal and improvements to the way that people make comments. And there's been training given to parish councils and to ourselves as councillors, changes made that, and they're still being worked on that would make councillor comments and the comments of parish councils in the future public, so that the members of the public could see what we think and what parish councillors think, etc. There has been a lot of work done on the software to make, when people go in to make a comment, that they can actually click on and see what type of comment they want to make. So it's improved how relevant it is to the planning application, because they can see whether it fits into a certain criteria of material considerations. I also want to note that it's not statutory to publish public comments online. Manchester and Nottingham do not publish the comments online. So other core cities, some never have, some local authorities are doing the same as us and looking at stopping, or indeed have stopped. Some have never published the public comments online. So I want to thank the team for working so hard. You have the report in front of you, and I will ask David to make some further comments, but I just want to thank the team for working so hard on trying to make the planning portal as easy to use and as much better than it was in the past. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Hayden, for your overview. I think that covers the ground in terms of the context. I just wanted to add, Chair, briefly, there's a slide on the monitors which just flags a number of metrics around the outcome and the evaluation of the pilot process. It does emphasise the staffing time savings that we're able to deploy in other priority areas, and also illustrates the fact that over the pilot period, whilst the numbers of planning applications have actually gone down because of wider economic circumstances, the numbers of representations coming in have exceeded what we had, whilst third party comments were there. So that really goes to the heart of some of the issues, really, because whilst some are keen that third party comments are online, others see that as a deterrent to making their own comments because of the nature of it. So it's encouraging that responses have gone up during the pilot period, not down. The other point to make, Chair, just quickly as well, is that the report sets out the framework for decision making within development management, and it's really important to emphasise to members here that the non-publication of third party comments doesn't in any way compromise our decision making process. People are still able to comment on planning applications, notwithstanding the fact that public comments aren't displayed. We're still making technical comments available online. We are strengthening the advice online about material considerations so that those members of the public who wish to comment are able to direct their comments around material considerations so they can have a greater impact in terms of considering the nature of proposals. And finally, all of the comments we get will be considered by the planning case officer and covered as part of the officer report, and we remain the same position in terms of our protocols and our panel arrangements and delegations, etc., etc. None of that is changed through the third party aspects. I just really wanted to reassure you, Chair, and members that none of those factors will be compromised by this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dave and Councillor Hayden. Now, I had two questions, but you kind of have answered it whilst making your introductory comments. So I'll just take a question from Councillor Buckley.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it's really defending the indefensible. Looking at the slide up there, 500 hours a year equals 10 hours a week. 10 hours a week, that's a quarter of one person's salary. That's what, 8 grand, 7 grand? It's a pathetic saving. And also, people making offensive comments online and inappropriate comments, this can simply be redacted, can't it? And to say that the staff are left affected by this, I think that's putting it a bit high, don't you, really? I think it's really, it's too bad. And 10 hours a week for a city the size of Leeds, that's a poor do.
10 hours a week of being a social media manager, which my planning officers are not trained to do. 10 hours a week, which they should be and now are devoting to considering planning applications. These professional officers are not trained in redacting, and they shouldn't have to put this time in, and they're not trained to redact offensive comments. And I'm sorry, but I have obviously a greater sense of empathy that when people, because I don't like reading offensive things online, so I just don't bother. But when it has to be something that you have to do in part of your work, otherwise the council and potentially yourself will get sued. then it does cause a great deal of harm and distress to very professional officers who take their job extremely serious. I would rather, and I'm sorry, but every penny counts, especially when we're in this budget crisis that we're in. I would rather that these officers were spending their time considering planning applications and doing it within a good time frame, rather than looking at public comments which actually shouldn't have been there in the first place and don't need to be seen by other people, especially when they're not related to any material considerations at all.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I have a very much the opposite view. I think the numbers in this report speak for themselves. I think the big concern everybody had with this change is that it could potentially put people off from making comments on planning applications. And the numbers, if anything, suggest the reverse of that. I doubt that the changes, well, some of that increase might well be because people feel more confident about commenting. It may not be, but either way, what we can say, I think, with certainty is that it's not put people off from commenting, which I think is absolutely the crucial thing in terms of, do we have a planning process which people feel that they can be involved in? So actually, my point was more going to be that I think this shows the strength of, trying things out and experimenting and doing pilots. And, sometimes, for something like this, which is really sensitive, planning is really important to people. Any change is difficult. So I think the kind of pilot approach made sense. I think the numbers show that the pilot worked. I would just say that we should be encouraging this culture of innovation in our teams, in our planning team, and give officers the confidence that if they pilot something and experiment, and the evidence, and if the evidence suggests that that experiment has been useful, that they will get our backing as councillors to change policy as appropriate, rather than right from the off, making I think a lot of councillors, to be honest, have made their decision right from the beginning about whether or not they think this change was going to work. And despite all of the evidence, clearly some people still think it's been unsuccessful. But I think the evidence is quite hard to look at that evidence and say that this hasn't been a success. Yeah, I would just say let's continue with piloting and experimenting and trying new things, and have the confidence to do that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. Yes, Councillor John Cavani.
Thank you, Chair. My query around this, when it came about, I think Councillor Hayden's aware of this, was from the town and parish council point of view. Having spent 11 years on a town council planning committee, I know that they looked at comments, and quite often their view would be, okay, the neighbours have covered it all, let's leave it with them, and we'd comment appropriately on that. Or sometimes it actually highlighted something that we were not aware of. And no matter how close you are to a community, if you don't live in that community, or even maybe in that street, you're not necessarily always aware of what goes on. Councillor Hayden mentioned that there was training given to town and parish councils. Could we have an outline of what that training was and when it happened, or if it's still ongoing and available? Thanks.
Back, I can't actually remember when it was, but thanks, Councillor Hayden. Lots happened. An awful lot's happened recently. We actually did a conference and invited all the town and parish councils across the area. I think it's Horsforth, Councillor Galvani, that you're involved with. Horsforth didn't come, but we actually are in separate conversations with Horsforth Clark just at the moment. But anyway, as part of that conference, we outlined as one part of the agenda the approach to third party comments. So we went through kind of what the pilot was actually involved in, but a substantial part of that conference was talking about how to write very, very effective third party comments.
because as you're aware from looking at comments, sometimes there are misleading information in there and a lot of the time quite non-material information in there. And as we know, planning is very difficult. I'm not a planner and I find it quite difficult from time to time. So for sort of person on the street, it's quite difficult. So the training that we gave to town and parish councils was to encourage them to focus their representations on key planning matters, to look at the planning merits or dismerits of a particular scheme, and to make sure that their comments were very much planning focused, not necessarily to be swayed on personal factors or other non-material factors, because at the end of the day, those are the factors that the planning case officer is only able to take into consideration. So that sort of, we had one of our very experienced group managers, Dave Newbury, who you may know from North and East Plans panel. He actually delivered that session, and we've had an awful lot of very, very positive feedback from town and parish councils from that. We've got an ongoing dialogue with town and parish councils as we work through placing those who wish to onto consultee access, which will allow their comments to be published live on public access.
Just to say thanks for that, and I'll follow that up. I no longer sit on that planning committee, so I'm slightly out of the loop now since I came on City Council. But I'll take that back and make sure it's followed up. Thank you.
If I could just add, it was a really good conference. You know, it was all online and it was really well attended. So I'd like to pass on my thanks to all the parish councillors, because they don't get the same time allocation that we get, and it's very much a voluntary kind of role, and I really appreciated, and I know the team did, their presence at that conference and their ongoing work, and and my thanks to the team for supporting them, because they fulfil a very important role you know, around the city, and we are working with them on the yes. You won't be aware as a councillor, especially of a big, you know, ward, but we do, all councillors can access the planning applications, and I would just encourage other ways of communicating with, you know, we're not always aware if something's a bit contentious unless somebody actually contacts us, but you know, just if you see something in the planning list that comes up that you think that might be a bit problematic, it's whether we as councillors can contact people in that street or in that area to see if anybody's got any concerns. So you know, I would just encourage every ward councillor to do that, to keep an eye on all the planning applications that are coming through for their ward. I know that's very, very difficult for yourself, Chair, the amount in a city centre ward, the amount of planning applications that do come in. So it's easier for some, but we can all sign up to those alerts. They come through. So if you can't sleep, they come through about 10 o'clock at night. So you can have, but everyone's not as sad as me. And, but it does alert you to what's something that might be contentious in your area.
Thank you, Councillor Hayden. Councillor Galton.
Thanks, Chair. Can you indulge with a couple of questions? The first one is, how many people are employed by the planning service, if you don't mind me asking?
Taken as a whole with building control, it's about 170 people.
Okay, I just wanted to get some perspective, Chair, because I'm looking at the time that's mentioned up there in terms of what's being saved or whatever. It's actually 5.5 hours per week, which is spent looking at comments and redacting them. 5.5 hours, not 10 hours. There's an additional 4 hours per week, apparently, which are spent dealing with the, 5 breaches that were mentioned. And it's actually the complaints that were the result of those 5 breaches, which accounted for almost half of the time of this officer in question. So in terms of that, we don't train our staff. I think that's a black mark, actually, on your service. You should be training your staff to ensure that they are confident in delivering their job so that they're not creating breaches, which then create a further impact on the service. And then I'll go into the rest of the paper, Chair, because I really do feel like we're really being sold something in a way which is out of proportion to what it is. So you've already pointed out it's 1 day a week for one person, less than that, to actually read these comments. You've got 170 staff, but apparently by saving these 5.5 hours a week, you are it's allowed the service to concentrate on other areas to improve business systems, concentrate on core activity, resourcing other priority projects, explore other income streams, and undertake other activities which add value to the planning process for both internal and external stakeholders. As a result, the pilot has allowed the service to better manage fluctuating workloads and other necessarily core statutory duties within the resources available. In addition, this increased capacity and agility has enabled the service to respond effectively to a time-limited and income-generating major project on behalf of Her Majesty's Land Registry. This has delivered an on-time and achieving income of £200,000. Chair, we're talking about 5.5 hours a week of an admin job. Releasing that has not delivered £200,000 of extra income. It has not delivered an entire restructuring of the planning system to make it a more effective and more efficient vehicle. You are really overemphasizing the impact of this on the service. What you are underestimating, though, and not recognizing in particular, is the impact that it has on the average person who are trying to deal with a really complicated planning system, and the value to them of the ability to go into the system and actually see what other people have said about an issue which is impacting on them. And they might not have the confidence that we might have in terms of how they can articulate themselves, how they can express themselves in writing, and having the access to comments from other people who do have that confidence enabled them to participate in the process. To not have that there for them to refer to means that it might actually mean that some people are not engaging with the process. But you pointed out that more people are commenting, but you wanted a better quality of comment. If those people aren't able to judge what other people are saying, how are they able to think, oh, that was a really good point, I'll add to that? And actually, if there's more comments coming through, are you really saving all that time? Because the officers still have to read all of those comments. Do you see what I mean? So you're not saving all of this time. They still have to go through those, process them, put them into a report. They might not have to physically type them up and stick them on a portal, but they still, as professionals, are going to review all those comments and take them into consideration into a report. I really do think you're overemphasizing and over justifying the initial decision you made and trying to make it out like it saved the service, and it really doesn't ring true.
Putting aside my utter devastation of being given a black mark by Councillor Galton, nobody ever had to type up onto the planning portal the public's comments. They did that themselves. It was the redacting and therefore dealing with the breaches, because these are trained planning professionals. They are not GDPR experts, nor would they ever have gone into this service intending to be. They are not lawyers, and therefore then they had to deal with breaches that came about from not being trained in that particular service in order to get rid of the comments. As for when you release that time, and it is 10 hours because the hours spent on dealing with the breach is the direct consequences of the hours spent redacting. No longer having to redacting means that the planning officers can now do their actual job and read the comments that the public have now put in even more. That's what they want. They want material comments to come from the public to inform their decision about a planning decision, to inform their work and how the public feel about that. So, as I mentioned, there has been done a lot of work into helping people make high quality comments. To be frank, if you were going on the planning portal before and you saw some of those frankly horrendous comments, it would not help you make a high quality planning comment on a particular application. And, you know, the swear words had to be taken out in order to inform us as councillors as to what some of these comments could become now. How that would help a member of the public. What I do know is that it may, I haven't got any material evidence for this, but circumstantial evidence of 30% uplift, in fact, it's more than 30%, would suggest that people are feeling more comfortable in not seeing other comments, more comfortable about making their own because they know that their neighbours, that the developer, that anybody else won't be able to see what they're going to write. That's made them more comfortable to do so. The portal is being changed so that you can click on and advice is being given as to how to make, and that has seen an increase in the quality of comments as well. And they are comments that now planning professionals can use in order to produce their report and to use. As for freeing up, then if you free up an hour to be able to look at other funding streams, then we might be able to get more than 200,000 into the service if people are freed up from being social media managers in order to do the job that they're actually professionally graduated in and wanted to spend their lives doing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hayden. Any more additional comments, Dave?
Just an observation on Councillor Goldson's comments about sort of resourcing, really. I mean, just to give a little bit more perspective to it. I mean, we have a finite number of staff, which is in part decreasing as well. There are additional statutory responsibilities that are with us now as a service, plus additional responsibilities coming down the line. We need to use our workforce in a way that is agile and effective, taking into account the wellbeing issues highlighted by Councillor Hayden. And, you know, to reassure Scrutiny, the resources that we have saved from the third party comment issue in terms of redaction, following up the complaints, dealing with all of the peripheral activity associated with it, we have been more able to be agile in supporting the land registry work and other new and emerging activity within the service. If we didn't have those extra hours, in inverted commas, we would have really struggled to have done that and probably wouldn't have met those targets. Compared to other services, planning is a relatively small service, but it's a service that's under immense pressure with great expectations for, you know, inclusive growth, delivering on the climate emergency and health and well-being. We can't do that if staff are overworked and they're working on non-statutory activity when they need to be deployed on statutory priorities for which the council will be subject to a performance management regime, which is coming down the line. So we need to be geared up for this now, and this is part of our continued commitment to continued improvement within the service. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Dave and the team and to Councillor Hayden for all of that. And obviously, this has been a 6-month pilot, and at the end of the day, if comments were maybe not made at all, or people were afraid, or people did not want to, then I would have had a problem with that. But obviously the statistics that you're showing us today is also showing an increase in comments. So at the end of this discussion, I would really like to seek a formal recommendation from all the board members that the publication of third-party comments online does not resume again. I think we've gone over this over and over again, and we now need to move on to other things. So with a show of hands, please, I would like to ask that we do not resume this online discussion on third-party comments. So please, if you would like us to just put this discussion to an end, can you kindly put your hands up for us, please? Show of hands. Just show of hand, put your hands up. I want to recommend that we actually formally not resume this discussion again, because we've gone over it, and it's over 6 months now, and we now have been given statistics on the progress of the pilot. So I just want to have a formal recommendation that we do not resume this online discussion again.
Sorry, Chair, I was under a misapprehension. I thought the paper had been brought here for the scrutiny board to endorse the continuance of non-publication.
That's correct, but I want to formally ask for I'm formally asking that we recommend that we do not resume this discussion again.
But you need to make a decision.
Sorry?
It's to not resume.
The comments, that's what I'm asking for. The comments online. It's a formal meeting, so I need this to be formally agreed, please. Yeah, can you, yeah, it's a yes. Yeah, thank you very much to each and every one of you for your contributions today and for all your hard work with this. So we shall now move on to agenda item number 10, and over to you, Becky, please.
If I can just ask members to note the work programme, if there are any changes to let me know. At the pre-meet, we did also discuss circulating the provisional dates for 24-25, so I'll do that as requested.
Okay, just to say thank you very much again to the planning team and to all board members who have attended today. Hopefully, like I did say at the beginning of the meeting, I do hope that 2024 will be more fruitful for each and every one of us. So the next meeting of the Scrutiny Board will be on the 28th of February 2024 at 10:30 a.m. and pre-meeting at 10:15. So thank you all and have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.